Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Alison Tiemann and I am the founder and host of Honey Badger Radio. And with me today is Hannah Wallen, who is the host of our Thursday show, HBR Talk. And Hannah's come to us with a very special new topic. So tell me about that topic and why you chose it.
Well, this one's a doozy. So in the last few weeks or so, there's been a great deal of controversy over American selective service and the draft. And the reason that this has been so controversial has been controversial prior to that for a long time, right? I mean, there were protests. Most people don't know this, but the fire in a crowded theater argument that people make against free speech it's actually a misnomer. That's probably not the right word, but in any case, they're messing up when they use it. It was made in a case against a man who was protesting the draft, and the ruling against that man in that case was overturned much later on, because you do have the right to protest against the draft. So they basically were trying to charge him as a spy, a war criminal, and that did not end up working out for the U.S. government in the long run. But in any case, there's been, for the last century, opponents of the draft in general, mostly men and people whose male family members were subjected to it. The Vietnam era was a really stark example of that. There was a lot of in the street protest. There was a lot of fleeing the country and draft card burning and so on. Great deal of media protest as well. And so this isn't anything new. But during the last, I don't know how long ago it was that the National Coalition for Men actually filed the lawsuit. I'll have to get that fact for my opener, which is of course not yet published. But there's been a lawsuit by the National Coalition for Men for quite some time that's been working its way through the courts to force the United States government to degender selective service. And it's not the first lawsuit. The first lawsuit, I believe, was back in the 80s, and at the time, the Supreme Court used differences in military roles between men and women as their excuse to not rule in favor of degendering the draft.
Okay, so it was
I think
April 4th, 2013.
Okay, so they began this then in 2013, the second time. So the thing that changed is, women have been fighting, feminists have been fighting for women to be able to fill combat roles, and they won that fight. And so there goes the last excuse to keep women out of selective service. So now, recently, SOTUS actually sort of foisted that off on the Congress. They're like, well, these guys are looking at passing a law. The Biden administration asked them to do that. Let Congress take care of it. And so now we are looking at the actual process. The Senate Armed Services Committee approved language in its annual defense policy making that change. It obligates women to sign up for the draft. Bipartisan panel of lawmakers from both the House and the Senate has actually urged the Senate Armed Services Committee to end the draft instead, because they don't want women to be added. They'd rather just scrap it altogether. Obviously, they don't want to be seen as drafting women. And so there's two purposes that this serves, in my opinion, that are important to discuss. One of them is, obviously, if feminism is about equality, then equal responsibility goes with that. And if it is a man's responsibility to agree to be forced by his government to fight in a war, regardless of his feelings and opinions on the validity of that war, that's a woman's responsibility too. Like, if your citizenship and your right to vote, your right to not be incarcerated, your right to attend higher education, and all the other things that get attached to a man's signing up for selective service at the moment that he is designated as a man instead of a boy in this country. If all of those things are going to be attached to becoming an adult for a guy, they have to be also for a gal if women are going to call themselves equal. And if that's not going to be the case, then the draft really does need to go. The other thing that I see as an importance in this is this is a huge demonstration of gynocentrism right here. We have this Senate committee that is actually making things equal. They're actually engaging in legislative action that will increase equal treatment under the law. And what the bipartisan group that wants to eliminate the draft is doing will also increase equal treatment under the law, in that it gets rid of the draft. And so nobody will be subject to it. Men will no longer be subject to it. I don't know if that would stay permanent, because it didn't stay permanent when, I want to say Ford did it to continue Nixon's intended actions. He eliminated, I want to say it was Ford that eliminated the draft. And it lasted for like one administration. But that is still equality. And
Yep.
Both pathways, in my opinion, are preferable for different reasons. Adding women to the draft would discourage lawmakers from wasting lives in war unless, they were completely and utterly sociopathic. And not that they're not sociopathic for wasting men's lives, but society accepts that, and it won't accept wasting women's lives. So that would put a check on the overuse of the military, except among certain types of politicians, and then that would make what they're doing obvious. Eliminating the draft would put an even bigger check on their war powers, because then they would have to rely on volunteer service if they wanted to fight a war. So it would have to be, they'd have to sell it to the public enough to actually make people inspired to want to fight in that war. And I think that, to me, is preferable, because the first serves American men. It would protect American men to a degree, and it would also give American men some satisfaction in how they've been treated and how unequal things have been for them. The second serves men all over the world, in that the American military cannot be misused as a world police force that polices the American federal government's interests around the world, instead of the interests of the people of the nations that they're interfering in, and the interests of the people of the United States. So both would be good. I will be satisfied with both. I think the addition of women to the draft, it ultimately is going to be a step toward eliminating it. But I also think women need to be able to step up. And I think in the end, that ultimate elimination would be better for the entire world.
I would like to add that I think that if we do retain the draft and we include women, it would be in women's interest to really consider if they want to promote things like feminism's toxic masculinity, male privilege, and patriarchy, which demoralizes men.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that's keeping them out of having to serve themselves is, of course, a volunteer military mostly comprised of men. So, the keeping men willing to volunteer for the military, willing to feel like capable of it, might become in women's best interest if they have to have skin in the game. So maybe women will be less inclined to support things that make men question themselves as men, and engage in these kind of demoralizing ideologies that really have no basis in reality. So I think that's one positive potential benefit, even if the draft isn't overturned. That
Definitely.
it would make women think twice about while attacking men's masculinity and attacking their identity and attacking their worth in society. And also attacking the recognition of that worth in things like Memorial Day. So, and I think that would be a good thing. Cause, and furthermore, women really should have skin in the game. If they are politicians, if they're making these decisions, then they need to feel the consequences of those decisions as well. Although I did have one really interesting argument on Twitter in which a feminist asserted that until women are equal, men should be unequally subject to the draft. And I said, so you're saying that until women are equal according to some measure that you've invented, men should experience an actual black and white in the law inequality. And she essentially said yes.
You know, what's funny about that is that under the law, women are not only equal in every measure that feminists could possibly come up with.
Mm-hmm.
They've actually got privilege,
mm-hmm.
and feminists won't admit it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's probably the most stark example of that, besides the draft, is in reproductive rights
mm-hmm.
and the right to protection against intimate partner and sexual violence,
mm-hmm.
which are kind of, you can't separate those very much, because the only rape victims that ever get forced to pay their rapist after the fact are male victims of rape whose rapist has a baby
mm-hmm.
and retains custody. And I've actually had feminists argue that a guy has to be responsible because who else is going to be responsible for the baby? And they never consider the possibility of taking custody away from the rapist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you imagine, especially in cases where the guy is underage?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to give a pedophile custody of a baby that was conceived from the rape,
mm-hmm.
and then demand that the pedo victim, right, the victim of the pedophile, pay the pedophile for conceiving his child,
well,
and retaining custody.
It makes sense when you consider that, you know, they don't care about the issues that men face. They don't care about what men have to sacrifice to maintain society. They don't even want to recognize it. And of course, you know, if they don't recognize it and they don't care, then we're not going to have much of a society at the end of the day if we don't support the people who are maintaining it, who are building it, you know, and we don't give them any recognition. We're not going to be able to help them when they fail, which means that ultimately, if we continue to expect men to sacrifice for society and we don't make any effort to recognize it or assist them, we aren't going to have a society.
Right.
You know, that's a simple fact. Anyway, so if you'd like to hear more about the discussion of this recent development that the draft is being extended to women, please click click to Badger live streams in the low bar below, and the show will be this Thursday at 5:30 p.m. No, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That's correct, right? 7:30 p.m.
Yes, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, Thursday.
Okay, so thank you for your kind attention and have a lovely day.